mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
I'm your host, Katie Burke.
I'm your host, Dr. Jared Henson. And I'm your host, Matt Harrison.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are back at DUX in the Duck Den, and we made the big announcement yesterday. Martin made it while he was sitting in this seat right here. The surprise that came to us yesterday afternoon, and we are excited to have Willie here with us. And thanks for coming.
What's up, guys? How we doing? Y'all threw me right in the fire. I just got here.
Well, that's why we gave you a comfy chair.
Woke up, traveled all night, and now here we are talking. Good to be here.
We can't thank you enough for making time for us. This is just a full circle moment for us at Ducks Unlimited to have you here and to showcase, the number of families, the number of kids, the number of strollers, the number of puppies that are in this expo hall. It just really reinforces the heritage, the lifestyle, the tradition, and the family values associated with the outdoors.
Well, one of the big reasons that I'm here is my daughter is running this booth for Duck Commander. So we are in third generation, and you know how daughters are. So and she didn't even ask me, but I happened to be I was fairly close. I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas yesterday, and I called my wife. I said, I'm gonna change the plans. I'm fixing to run to Memphis and hang out. And this brings back so many memories, because we were running this booth with my father and mother. In fact, we were in Memphis.
Wow.
Outside. So I thought this was outside. I was thinking 20 years ago, and I thought we were going to be in a parking lot baking, and this is certainly a lot better situation. But it does bring back the memories of we used to come and set up our tables and sell our duck calls and VHS tapes, and we did it as a family, as our family business. So, a lot has happened. We just lost Phil, and so, he would be proud knowing that we're still out doing what he started, 50 years ago with Duck Commander and the brand now, and so much obviously has happened, but it's fun seeing that passed down to another generation, like you said, in the outdoors, but also for us, the outdoors and an outdoor business as well.
Well, and we have those same type of stories are here this year. Mm-hmm. Somebody with a dream and a garage and an idea, and they're making it happen. This is their opportunity to make their pitch and introduce themselves to a new customer base. And for some of them, it's going to be a life-changing business experience. And it is a family connection, and it's really special to see that. And that's what powers Ducks Unlimited. Our volunteers are multi-generational family volunteers that host those events in Monroe or Mulberry, Florida, or wherever, to ultimately protect the habitat that's going to put ducks in front of the blind across North America.
Yeah, that's what it's about. And my father had such a passion for ducks, and was ate up with it. And then I was fortunate to be able to come in and take over the business when I was about 30. And of course, I branched into bucks as well. I had other ideas too to make it. I told Phil, I said, you keep doing that, and obviously we love ducks, but we're gonna we kind of caught a vision of what could happen. And fortunately with when Duck Dynasty happened, we made everybody think about ducks. Everybody sat around a living room and talked about ducks, and so we were proud of that. I was really proud of it for Phil and what the legacy he started, that everybody got to see that, and kind of see all the heavy lifting he had done, and the passion he had towards that. And so, but like I said, when we would show up to events like this, it was so fun, because you'd be out with people and hear the stories. And I remember, I came out with a fancy duck call. I said, Dad, we need to. These guys like these expensive duck calls. Phil's like, I don't know about all that. I said, well, I think, people like that. They like, a little bit fancier. So I had these duck calls, and I was so proud. And we sat them out on the table, and it was $100. And so a guy comes up, and he picks one up. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to sell this guy a $100 duck call. And Phil comes up, reaches in the bend of the $15 duck calls and starts blowing it. And the guy's like, whoa, man, that's so impressive. And Phil looked at me and said, well, I guess if you got $100 you want to waste, you can buy that one. If it were me, I would buy the $15. I said, Dad, you got to quit saying that. He goes, I just told him what I would do. And the guy bought the $15 duck call.
That's great.
Oh, that's incredible.
I think you mentioned Duck Dynasty, but what was so cool was to see past the Duck commander, that guy that sat in the blind, and to see his values. And Martin hit on that yesterday with us in here, that just those family values that are being shared so much around here, like Adam alluded to earlier. And that's what hit home to so many people.
That's right. Your family sacrificed so much privacy for the calling of being an example for family and for nature as a healing power, and of course a higher calling and an example of your faith. And Phil lived that, and so many of us respected it and are grateful for all your family did to be the salt and light.
Right. Well, that there's a story that I think it was 1980. So Phil had so in 1980 he would have just had, he's probably a new Christian 4 or 5 years at this point in his life, and we're in New Orleans. I think we're at the Superdome. Phil is blowing his duck calls, doing his demonstration, and he said everybody was about half drunk, one of these shows. It was sponsored by Budweiser, and Phil blew his duck calls, and he said, all right, I guess I'm going to give y'all a little sermon here. And so he goes and starts this preaching thing, and one of his buddies said, Phil, you can't mix that together. You can't mix your business with your faith. You're going to have to keep that separate. Not everybody wants to do that. And Phil said, well, as bad as I was, I feel like I've got a lot of making up to do for all the wild living I was doing. And so he never separated that. He always kept that, and pretty much everywhere he went, he was always preaching everywhere he went. And so it turned out that the guy was wrong, that when your faith is that important. And so you got to think about it like this, and we put a movie out last year called The Blind, and I don't know if you've seen that, but it's their story of faith, and you don't realize, really making the movie, I realized how close we were to the whole family just being never happening. I mean, never getting off the ground. Phil had kicked us out, and it looked like there was no hope. And were it not for Dad's sister, who begged this preacher to go up in that bar he was at and preach to him, and this guy did it. He got in his car and he drove to, from West Monroe, Louisiana to Junction City, Arkansas, went into this bar, and it was confrontational. Phil wasn't, he didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to talk to this guy. And he told him a story about hope and change, and that he could be redeemed, and nothing happened. And Phil went on to doing even crazier stuff, and ended up running from the police, and his life was such a mess. The family was over, and I think Mom thought it was totally over. She had already taken us to Louisiana and was like, it's over. And she was hopefully he wouldn't get killed or whatever in this crazy stuff he was doing. He comes back, gives his life to God at 28 years old. Incredible. And if, were it not for the faith, our family would not have been together. So none of this would have happened. There would have been no Duck Commander, obviously no Duck Dynasty, none of this stuff. I mean, my whole life would look completely different. So that's how important the faith is. Yeah. So we always felt like without the faith, we wouldn't have had a family. Now, if it would have only helped our family, it would have been completely worth it. It wasn't like there was some expectation of, well, maybe we'll do these big things, but just to keep that family together drastically changed our life, changed our dad. We saw this completely different person now. And then once he got going, he went as wild as he was. Then he just went 100% for faith. And and the outdoors was just such a part of his life, and it was the way we grew up was the same way. It's it was about half survival. I mean, we ate and lived off the land. We didn't have any money. We were really poor. Phil was a fisherman mostly. That's how we made money. And he always had this dream of this duck call, like, boys, one of these days we're going to sell. He'd say we're going to sell $1 million worth of these duck calls. And I got to be honest, we were like, how is that going to happen? I didn't really understand. I didn't understand the business plan he had at the time. But and then as it worked out and what God put before us, he had so much more through them, through what Phil did, then through our generation, and then to the next generation, thinking about just my kids in particular, where they took off to, the stuff Sadie does all over the world, preaching, and it's just amazing. And you can trace all that back to this one guy driving up to a bar, talking to Phil, one couple, no money, destroyed marriage, just a long trail of hopelessness. And who would have thought that all that was going to come out of there? And that's the power of what faith can do and what God can do with people. And so, it's turning that dead stuff into life and darkness into light. And Phil lived that out. So I was able to see that. And he was the real deal. I mean, he was not different on Saturday than he was on Sunday, on Tuesday. It was always the same. And so this business was just part of really getting our faith out there. And then the way God worked it out was we were able to do that through a TV show, through simple things like, a prayer at the end of a show, which was unheard of. You really didn't see that on television. And I don't know that Phil ever understood Duck Dynasty. He said, "Will, there needs to be way more preaching on this show." I said, "Dad, there's another Robertson family that does that. It's the 700 Club. This is not that." I said, "This is a fun show." And he goes, "Well, if they let me go," I said, "If we're just gonna give them a little bit. If they want to come back and read a book or listen to a podcast, we'll do that." And it was. And it didn't. The way it turned out was amazing.
I tell you what, talking about how the Lord works and stuff, I know you probably won't remember this at all, but I know for a fact I would not be sitting in this position I am right now with Ducks Unlimited if it wasn't for you and your family. Me and my brother did not grow up in a waterfowl hunting family whatsoever, but we loved baseball. And in Pearl, Mississippi, the Mississippi Braves had a baseball game, and we grew up going to those games.
Yeah.
And y'all had a booth there one night, and we met some of y'all, and y'all signed a poster. We were not waterfowl hunters, but we were like, this is so cool. We want to get into it. And that is what
And
sparked.
that was before Duck Dynasty.
It was. And
We threw the first pitch.
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
And Phil did too. Phil hit the third, and I was so happy.
But y'all signed us a poster. My family was not in the waterfowl industry whatsoever, and it sparked our interest. Fell in love with it. Fell in love with waterfowl hunting. Grew up in a Christian home, and what y'all's values were resonated with us, which ultimately led to where I am now with Ducks Unlimited. And I say that with chills.
Wow.
That truly is so unbelievable to see how the Lord works. And I know for him, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be in this position.
That's crazy.
Right now.
You should give me 10% of all the money you ever make for the rest of your life, just for just for what I've done for you.
The Willie tithe. The Willie tithe.
So Philip Wellman was the manager, I believe.
He was.
Philip, So that's how we got there, because I was friends with him through Adam LaRoche, through my Buck Commander stuff, because they were friends. And Philip, we deer hunted together, and then he was down there, and he said, "Hey, y'all should come over and throw the first pitch and do that." Wow.
Do you remember the video of him and getting the rosin bag and throwing it?
Who doesn't know that video? The most epic meltdown ever of a manager crawling and doing the grenade and awesome.
Anyway, but
wow,
truly thank you.
I didn't realize that was a small world.
Such a good story. And I think, one of the things we asked Martin yesterday when he was sitting in this seat was about how the world has changed, waterfowling world has changed, and the influencers and how that looks. And I said, what would you tell the future? Like, what would you tell somebody? And talking about all the kids he was meeting, and he said, take the time to just spend with every single kid. And he said, it's one of the things I watched Phil do so many years before all of that was just spend time with kids and give them that little bit. And now sitting in your seat now, watching your kids do it and watching Sadie, think about how many people that's touched. Man, you have done an amazing job as a father, but you're right. That faith drew that family together, and now they're spreading it in so many different worlds in what they're all doing now. Man, you have to go to sleep at night knowing that watching your kids do what they're doing now.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, the main thing we wanted was that they understood the faith. Now, whether or not they embraced it or not was on them, but where they understood that. Mm-hmm. So you're passing that down. It was so important to us. Again, go back just one generation that the whole thing was almost, they never would have happened where faith not stepped in. And so, and that's that family motto we have, that faith, family, and ducks. But it's in that order. And so what happens is, for all of us in life, that'll start getting out of order. We may think, oh, that's where we're at, but the faith will slide down. The job will come. You'll realize, man, I'm giving most of my stuff to my job, and then once it gets out of order, you don't have the helpers. So the faith will help the family stay together. It should. The family will help the vocation stay together. Believe me, if there's trouble at home with one of your kids or with your spouse, will you be as good at work? Not a chance, And I think we've all been there when we're at work and trying to do something. You got trouble at home, or you've got a kid that's, wacky, or you and your spouse are arguing or fighting or whatever. And so that's just that kind of that balance that we try to put in. Now, when it comes to what they wanted to do, I never pushed any of my kids to do any of this, whether or not they wanted to work in the business or not. Because you also don't know. When I was 20, let me tell you, the last place I wanted to work was Duck Commander.
Wow. Sure.
I was so over it. Like, I had been doing this job since I was, 7 years old. Because that's the deal with Phil. Like, Phil didn't really hire any employees. He was glad he had 4 boys, and we were the employees. So we did the work, and never got paid really any money. Phil would give us speeches about electricity and food and gas, and so he's like, everybody's got to play their part. And he was always so terrible with numbers, and I think he did this on purpose. So we get home from school, and he'd say, hey, go dip him duck calls, about 20 or 30 duck calls. It was about 80 or 90 duck calls. And we had this big, he had a plywood board with nails on it, and so we would dip the calls in the tungo, and then we would have to hang them on the deal. And our fingers were always stained, and I was always embarrassed. I'd go to school, and I wouldn't want people to see my stained fingers from the. And then we'd fold boxes, which that wasn't as bad because we could watch Dukes of Hazzard, so we'd watch TV. But if you were watching TV, you had to be folding boxes at all. So our living room was just always a pile of boxes that we were folding to put the duck calls in. Then we would package them. We answered the phone. We were customer service, so it took me years before I could not answer a phone and say Duck Commander. I'd be like, Duck Commander, can I help you? And this was the home phone. Yep. And this was all in a 2-bedroom house where it's the same house that was on Duck Dynasty. Phil never lays in the same place that he was. And we'd answer the phone, we'd take orders, we'd write them on the back of a paper plate and put them in a little stack, and then Mom would ship them out the next day. And and we'd miss every day of school. This was sanctioned from Dad. So we used to get 40 days. You could miss 40 days, and we would take all 40 of them. Every one of them, we'd miss every day.
That's a lot of school to miss. Wow.
And a lot of those times it was working or hunting. It'd be like, oh, we're taking all, And so the way we looked at school was just a little bit different. And now, whether or not my kids, so growing up, they grew up obviously a lot different than we grew up. And so, man, I cherish that. I cherish how we grew up. I cherish that we didn't have money. We didn't have, TV. We had 3 channels. We had no, obviously no electronics. And we would just, boom, we'd hit it out. We were outside, just outside and fishing and hunting, just love the way that is. And so whether or not our kids get that or not, that was when I was 20. Well, it wasn't until I was 30 that I started recognizing kind of what the business was and what Dad had, it's funny, I was actually thinking about this morning, like at some point then you really start appreciating your father and your parents. You're like, you're kind of like, man, they don't know what they're doing. And then you're like, dadgummit, they're actually pretty, and so
not as dumb as I thought they were.
So I came back to Dad when I was about 30, and I said, hey, I think I can I think I can take this, and run this business. And Phil kind of thought it was over. He said, well, I think everybody's done bought a duck call that's going to buy one. So he was like literally thinking, I think this whole thing's over. I said, well, give me a run at it. Let me see. And then the first year, I just traveled with him to shows like this. And I would run the booth, and Phil would get up and do his speaking and preaching. And I just watched, and I was like, man, he's so captivating. He's such a storyteller. I just watched the interaction he had with people. It was caring about people. It was showing people and teaching. Phil was a teacher at heart. He's an education guy. He was a school teacher. And so he loved teaching and also, I think we forget too, when he was younger, he was a great salesman. He could just sell stuff. I mean, he would set up all these little things. He had somebody in law enforcement, and they did a voice analysis of his duck call, and it was so he played it up next to a real mallard duck, and it was like a 95% the same.
Wow.
And that was and he would play that for customers. They'd be like, yeah, and he would. So he had his little shtick of where he wanted to sound just like a duck. So it wasn't about the kind of the pageantry of duck calling or competitions. He was always kind of the opposite of that. He was more just like, it's that $15 duck. I was like, this sounds like a duck. This will get them closer to you in the woods. And that was it. It wasn't the whole thing. And so Phil never got into that. So I ended up coming in at 30. And I think my oldest is just now 30. So you never know where that. So you could have a change of heart and be right. You know what? I mean, they're saying now your brains aren't developed, which I could definitely attest to this until you're like, for a guy, it's like 25 years old. I mean, so you really don't know who you are and what you are and all that. And but having them to be able to come in, and my daughter's here, and so the funny thing is they married my little son-in-laws are big hunters and outdoorsmen, and so I'm seeing that kind of that bright-eyed passion, the same one that I had. I was like, let's go, let's get after this. The same thing that Phil had, and so we can mix that together with experience and maturity in a business and be grounded in your faith, and then you just never know what can happen. So it is fun watching them take that, and then what are the new ideas? Because obviously, we were talking about 20 years ago. I was in Memphis doing this show. We was outside a parking lot. It was almost 100% cash. Like we just had like a bag of cash. My mom was like you look like one of these armored truck drivers with that little cash. And we'd go into, we'd always go eat steak and all that. And we're so excited about that. And then my daughter said she was just here trying to buy a coffee at some coffee shop. They don't even take cash.
They don't take it.
So there's no cash, It's, so the way business has changed, and we would sell VHS tapes.
That's incredible.
Like crazy. And when I switched, my big business move when I came in, I moved from VHS to DVDs, and Phil thought I'd lost my mind. Phil's like,
now they don't even make DVDs.
Phil's like, what is a DVD? I said, it's way better than a VHS tape. Like, you ain't even got to rewind it. And he said, I think you're making a bad move there.
Right.
I said, Phil, you're the only guy with a VHS player, I think, in the state of Louisiana.
It's kind of like CDs these days.
And now, I mean, although people still do buy DVDs, which is amazing. But now even because we have a television show, and we have another television show, Duck Dynasty, the Revival, and even cable now. Like, my wife said, Willie, you're one of the last people I know who still has cable TV. And I remember we had 3 channels. I'd always heard about cable. And I'm like, it was like the first level of heaven. It's like, it's hundreds of channels.
That's right.
And in my lifetime, it's went from the best thing I've ever, I thought this is it, to where now it's a dinosaur and it's gone.
Right.
And everything's streamers and everything's
cord cutters now.
Podcast. Yeah. I'm still hanging on to my cable.
And now radio's back, right? We're podcasting. So
Radio's back. Well, man, we could sit here and do this all day, and sitting in this room, this fire was kind of funny when we did it, but in this room, we may need to turn the heat on.
That is kind of cool.
But thank you so much for being here with us, and we want to there's probably a line a mile long back at your booth. We want to give you time to go over there and shake hands, and just from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for coming and spending time with us.
Man, it is a blast. Thank you guys for what you do. Thank you for putting this on, and DU, and just we've been partners for ever since I was a kid, that we've been together and on this mission of enjoying, protecting, promoting, and then passing that down.
Absolutely.
So that our kids can at least have the opportunity. And duck hunting's unique and it's special, and there's a lot to it. But, and it will, unless we keep going, you'll look up and it'll just be, gone. Just like these other things we're talking about.
Well, we're here for 3 years. We'd love to have you back next year. So same weekend, so if we can get that in.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Same weekend. All right. Well, we know that there are folks out there watching right now. This is live. He is here in Memphis. Come and see him at the Duck Commander and the Buck Commander
This
booth.
is not AI.
This is not AI. Nope.
Real deal.
You can't buy that on cable either. That's right. So come see us all today at DUX at the Duck Commander, Buck Commander booth. Come meet Willie, shake his hand, and get you a $15 duck call. Yeah. What are they today?
I have no idea.
All right. See y'all
Ask
later.
your daughter.
Ask Bella.
Willie.
See ya.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.